Welcome to Baseball and Coffee, episode 43 with Tino and Aaron. What's up, Aaron?
Too much. How are you?
I'm doing well. Still waking up, but doing well.
Yeah, I have a different morning over here. I ended up cooking a lot. Didn't have much baseball to look at as I watched Sandy start last night
Mhm.
at work, and most of my guys were off, so I chose to lean into the kitchen. One of my coworkers has a big garden. He keeps bringing me fresh fruits and vegetables, which is
Nice.
awesome,
Nice.
but they're also very perishable. So I
Right.
had a couple things that I wanted to make and use. So that was a different type of morning. I don't usually do that on during the week.
Right on. Well, being on the West Coast, it's still pretty early, so this is about all I can get accomplished in the morning. A little bit of coffee here, but feeling good. No no comments on my hat, huh? Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it. I asked you about that last time, but maybe that's lost in the archives.
I
I
forgot.
can't remember. Yeah.
Um, I've got I've been rocking it at work too. And people are like, what the hell is Cotillo Pit? I'm waiting
Right.
for it to become like people asking me if it's like a cool band or it becomes like the new Von Dutch. It won't obviously, but I love rocking the hat.
Yeah.
Uh
We should make another one that has like all the second basemen the Pirates have used this year.
right.
Like the whole front. You can just have him at the top and then like the
That's
five
funny.
other guys.
That's funny. So this episode we are going to we're going to talk about a surprising hitter and a surprising pitcher in our opinion, this current year, 2022, and then one September call up that we find intriguing each, and then a 2023 breakout star. So someone who we may not, or who we think is going to be a much better player in 23 than they've shown thus far in 22. We'll cover some games that we want to watch this weekend, and then if we have time, open forum and cards.
Okay.
Any coffee stories or coffee thoughts?
I do have one. I went to a local shop. I don't remember what day it was. I think it might have been Tuesday. But I got a Gibraltar. Have you ever
Mm,
heard that term before?
really?
Okay. Yeah, so it was on the menu. I asked the barista what it was. He compared it to a cortado,
Yep.
espresso forward milk beverage. So I ordered it. It was their one of their house ones, or they call it Thaddeus one. It's named after Thaddeus Stevens, who was a civil rights activist and senator here in the state
Mm-hmm.
of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And it was a very balanced, nice espresso, not fruity at all, very dark cocoa. And I enjoyed it quite a bit. And being the nerd I am, I had to look it up to figure out where Gibraltar comes from. It's actually the type of glass it's served in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then also, I guess the Cortado uses a different type of glass. And while he compared it to a Cortado, Gibraltar is more coffee forward because the Cortado is more like 50-50 milk and coffee, whereas the Gibraltar is more like a 2-to-1 ratio. So it was very good. I enjoyed the blend of espresso they had. Again, it was very coffee forward and very balanced. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
fruity, right on my alley. I would definitely get it again.
Nice. That's awesome. I I actually grew up in coffee thinking that a cortado was a Gibraltar.
Okay.
And in my shop in Chicago, that's what I called it. It's interesting that I think it's typical coffee world to try to differentiate between the two. Um,
Okay.
but there may be a formal differentiation at this point, but prior to that, that was my understanding. I'm sure it's developed quite a bit since I've been in the game, so that's more of just an old school take. But it
Yeah,
was
well, that's what he told me. He basically was like, "Oh, it's basically another name for a cortado." So it was
right,
interesting to dig in and see.
right, and then
Maybe they have blended together.
and you're right, the that is the name of the glass that's used for it, and that's
Hmm.
the standard glass in a lot of like food service world. That was my favorite beverage for a long, long time. I think that for it was either that if I wanted a little more milk, it was a Gibraltar, and I wanted a little less milk, I wanted a espresso macchiato. But I would waver in between those two. Um, that's cool. I love it. Um, I don't have anything real to report other than just continuing to drink the same standard stuff. But I am headed to Seattle this weekend to see my daughter Malia and to go to a Braves Mariners game, and I have some coffee plans for that trip. So that should be a lot of fun. Super excited about that. There are a couple coffee shops in Seattle that I miss a lot. QED is one of them, which is in like the Mount Baker area. Um, I don't know if it's switched ownership or not, but I'm excited to go anyways. And it's, you're literally 2 steps away from being able to look over Lake Washington and sit and have your coffee. So that's one trip. I might go to Elm in Pioneer Square,
Yes.
Brave Pioneer Square. Um, but there's a number of shops that I like to hit. I guess I'll probably have coffee twice or 3 times while I'm there. But quick trip to Seattle, and I'll have some stories to report after that.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Cool. So let's get started here. Surprising hitter for 2022.
Yeah, so for me, it was Andres Jimenez, and both the players that I am going to talk about, I didn't have ranked at their respective positions. Um, and Andres Jimenez is #1 in earned value so far this year. So he's clearly been much, much better than being off of a preseason draft list for sure.
Mm-hmm.
He his defensive runs or his defensive run save is also third at the position. So he's getting a lot of reps. Yeah, he's just really surprised me, and I'm not the only one. He in our league, our 16 team league, he was not kept, drafted, and dropped 3 times before he found a way on pure roster. So
Mm-hmm.
it definitely seems like he's securing his place and getting his footing. Um, from the power and speed standpoint, his ISO is very respectable for a second baseman, and his batting average is over 300 right now, and his BABIP's right in line with his career norms in terms of if you look at his track record in the minors. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't like anything he's doing doesn't seem terribly unsustainable. I think he might not reach this level again.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly seems like someone who's established himself as a pretty valuable up the middle piece.
He's interesting because he is the kind of player that I at times hesitate to roster, and I think that's why I cut him and then brought him back. Was he's got he's obviously fast. He's a 90 plus percentile, I think, for sprint speed. Um, he's got some power, right? And so I don't think anyone expects him to hit anything above 20 home runs, but somewhere between, I guess, maybe 12 and 18 was the expectation coming into the season. I think he was a considered kind of a lower average, lower OBP, power speed sort of guy coming in. Um, what we didn't expect is a 850-ish OPS throughout the year. The one thing that gave me pause is the really low walk rate. I think it's somewhere between 4 and 5%, if I'm not mistaken. And those are the types of players that I tend to stay away from. One of the other reasons why I cut him originally was he's hitting kind of like 6-7 area where he continues to hit. So that's not usually a place for an elite fantasy player to hit in a lineup. But he continues to surprise me. I think that he's a player who is worth digging into in the offseason to see why he really did what he did. And if you believe that that's sustainable, because there is going to be trade value, in my opinion, on the market in the offseason keeper leagues for a player like Jimenez.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned his walk rate. I'm looking at his tools on Fangraphs. They had his hit tool as a ceiling of a 55. What I've seen from him is he seems to have the pitch recognition and back control that when he gets a pitch he gets his pitch, he's able to turn on it and drive it for power. And he has a 183 ISO, which again, I think is very respectable for his size and his position. If you look at his spray chart, almost he has one opposite field double and one left of center double and one left of center home run.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Everything else is pulled. And that very much is not my experience watching him. Again, he just seems to have a good enough back control and pitch recognition to know when he can try to turn on something for power and he doesn't miss it.
Right.
He's good enough, but when he gets his pitch, he's able to drive it. And I think again, I don't think that there's anything about that that's not sustainable based on someone who had a 55 on their hit tool coming up.
Well, and there's his walk rate is 5.9%, so slightly above what I thought it was. He did run a 357 or has run a 357 BABIP this year. which obviously is pretty high. I'm looking right now for his ground ball rate, which is 44.2%. So it's I think slightly higher than average, but not egregiously high. Um, Again, he's a player that I would love to really dig into in the offseason to see, because since I roster him, to see whether he's worth really valuing and keeping, worth trading, or just a player that I won't keep at all. Um, let's see here. The only other thing worth mentioning, he does, as you said, swing a ton. So his O swing is, or his chase rate is 40.5% this year, which is actually down. But that's my understanding is that's a little bit above average. His swing percent is 52.4%, so he does swing the bat quite a bit. And then swinging strike rate this year is 12.9%. One of the reasons why we may have stayed away last year was his swinging strike rate last year was 16.2%.
Mm.
So super high swinging strike rate for a player that we were worried about whether he was going to have an average that would sustain you at the position in fantasy. So yeah, definitely a surprise. I'm thankful to have him. There have been some stretches this year where he's kind of carried me. Currently, he and the other thing about him is that he's pretty much a strong side platoon player. They don't play him versus lefties very often. The Indians don't, and so that's the other thing that needs to be managed in fantasy. He's one that could be paired with another player at his position if you have one. But 15 home runs, 52 runs, 60 RBIs, and 17 stolen bases with an OPS. Looks like, what is that? 865, right? No, 855 right now. So yeah, good player. And yes, most definitely a surprise,
Mm.
if I may say so myself. um, so my player, and I did the stats last week, so forgive me because the stats may have changed slightly over the course of the week. My surprise for 2022 is actually Mookie Betts. Mookie's 29. I think of him as like 33 since he's been around for so long, but Mookie's 29. This season in as of 527 plate appearances, he had 33 home runs, 104 runs, 74 RBIs, and 12 stolen bases. His walk rate this year is 8.7%, which is down 3.7% from last year. His K rate is 16.3%, which is actually up 0.9% over last year. He has a 281 BABIP, and then his triple slash is 282, 351, 571, so a 922 OPS, and a WRC plus of 156. Why is Mookie Betts a surprise? Last year, his OPS was 854, and he finished the season with 23 home runs, 93 runs, 58 RBIs, and 10 steals. Um, what I saw coming out of 21 for Mookie Betts was a player whose power was in a bit of a decline. You know, he is 29, so in theory, he'd be declining slightly physically. And a player that was hitting at the top of the Dodgers lineup, so he was going to score most years 100 runs, but may not break 60, 65 RBIs. I also saw the 10 stolen base number and thought, okay, are his days of stealing a decent amount of stolen bases over? He was incredibly selective in 21, and that was kind of his history. This year, it looks like he's made a very conscious change to hunt pitches and to hit pitches um, before he walks, right? Which sounds like a crazy skill to have, that you could choose
Right.
between a hit and a walk. Because his average exit velocity remains above 90 miles an hour. It's virtually the same as last year. His launch angle is similar to last year, just above 18 degrees, but his barrel rate is up 3% to almost 11%, and his hard hit rate is up almost 5% to 45%. So those are good numbers. But his O swing is up, and his swinging at balls outside of the strike zone and his swinging at balls inside the strike zone are both up, which means a swinging or a swing rate that's up 3.6%. And then finally, his swinging strike percentage is only 6.4. So
Wow.
what are my takeaways from this? I think he's uh, a player who physically is not, he's not an Aaron Judge, right? We all know that he's 5'9". So his average exit velocity is in the 78th percentile. His max is in the 50th. hard hit 79th, barrel 74th, on and on. But he is, I think his hand-eye coordination and his skill level is what really comes through. And I think that's what's really elite in him as a player. That can be seen in the fact that he's decided to, as I said, walk less and hit the ball hard more often. And he hits it in the right places. So the comps for him on Savant were 2022 Anthony Santander, Will Smith, Kyle Tucker, 21 Justin Turner, and 15 Josh Reddick. None of those sound like superstars other than maybe Will Smith and Kyle Tucker, right? But these are also players who hit the ball in the right places at the right times. I also think you think about his bowling skills, right? So he bowls 300 games often, and a player like that is someone who's, I think, just naturally elite with hand-eye coordination, and that translates to different sports and different activities. So to me, he's a more dangerous player now than he was for the last couple of years, and it is interesting to me that you can literally make a conscious choice to become a different sort of player, just like that. I don't think there's anything different in Mookie Betts' skill set from 21 to 22. It was simply a change in approach at the plate. Of course, the Dodgers probably helped him with that, but a change in his approach that has allowed him to become an elite player once again. So Mookie Betts was my surprise.
I wonder too about his hip, maybe he thought last year walking and getting on base was the best way he could help the team
Mm-hmm.
because he just wasn't right physically.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, he's historically ran, high walk rate, so that may be off on my part. But yeah, he's one of my absolute favorites. He's such a gem.
It's interesting too because his 8.7, correct me if I'm wrong, I think 8.7% walk rate is just below league average, correct?
Let's see here.
And I would never think of Mookie Betts as running a below average walk rate.
I had to look on Spot. Fangraphs is not giving MLB averages.
Cool.
Yeah, I think it's 8.3% is the league average walk
So
rate.
just slightly above.
Yeah, yeah,
Crazy. But yeah, I also think it's a good and we can have this conversation in the off season. I think it's a good exercise in challenging our kind of like traditional filter or paradigm with regards to what's the ultimate player or what are the stats that we look for, because both of us gravitate towards and hold on to so tightly to walk rate and selectivity. But selectivity can take I think multiple forms. And in Mookie Betts' case, it's not walk rate that's reflective of his selectivity. It's his ability to barrel the ball up and hit the ball hard. So I think that'll be a fun conversation because that pushes me
yeah,
to a place where I'm not as comfortable.
for sure. Yeah, I think it's almost like an ability to like, control the at bat or control the zone. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like yeah. So my surprise pitcher is Tyler Anderson, staying with the Dodgers franchise. So he was again someone I didn't have ranked. We talked about in the preseason when he signed with the Dodgers. I saw him as a swingman, someone who could step in when Kershaw's back, acted up, or someone went down. But didn't see him as a mainstay in the rotation, which is exactly what he's been.
Mm-hmm.
14 wins thus far this year. Number 15th in earned value at starting pitcher. And really the things that have been different for him this year has been, his increased vertical movement on his four seam and cutter, and then his changeup, his shape and his effectiveness with the changeup went from positive run value to a negative 12. One of the best, highest performing pitches, changeups in baseball. And three of his pitches actually have a negative run value. So, despite the lack of elite velocity, his command and his quality of his pitches, and because he has such good command and he has such good vertical shapes on those two pitches, and then the changeup that he can get swing and miss with, he's really elite at limiting hard contact, which is again a skill that he's really owned this year. So yeah, just someone who's really surprised me with his performance and his staying power in that rotation this year.
I was disappointed to see the Mariners not re-sign him at the end of 22. He doesn't come across because of the lack of elite velocity as someone who's very impressive. And you look at his historical statistics and they aren't great, but yeah, incredibly effective. And I think for me at least, he's a fun pitcher to watch because he's doing it with different things than just elite, or different things other than elite velocity. Good stuff. My surprise pitcher is Merrill Kelly, 33 years old. These stats are as of last week, but he's 12-5 with a 2.84 ERA. He's thrown 164 and 2/3 innings, about a 45% ground ball rate. His xFIP is 3.79, so it's about a run above what his actual ERA is. In 21, he was 7-11 with the 4.44 ERA and 158 innings, so similar number of innings as he's at right now. And then a 4.24 xFIP. So he wasn't really on anyone's radar other than maybe a SP streamer or really back end rotation guy. But he has really changed his changeup and become a pretty decent option as an SP. This year he's got a 7.3% walk rate and a 21.7% K rate. So his K minus BB isn't in that range that we're looking for. It's at 14.4%, but he's limiting batters to a 221 average, which has allowed him to have a 1.11 whip. His launch angle, his average exit velocity, and his barrel are all pretty much in line with what they were last year, but his hard hit rate is down almost 5%. And he only surrenders 0.55 home runs per 9 innings. So he's really, really adept at suppressing home runs. His swing strike rate is up slightly. It's up 0.8%. His CSW reflects that, is up 0.9%. But what I like about him, he's actually in some ways, there's some similarities between him and Chris Bassett. And this is another opportunity for us in the offseason to explore what having a greater number of pitches that are either average or slightly above average does for effectiveness, because both Bassett and Kelly, I think, are effective primarily because of the number of average to slightly above average pitches they have. It's not the quality of the pitch itself as much as it is hitters just have no idea what's coming. So in Merrill Kelly's case, he throws 5 pitches more than 13.3% of the time. And 4 of those 5 pitches have an over a 21.7% whiff rate or greater. So to have 4 pitches with the 20% whiff rate is pretty decent. 20% whiff rate isn't great, but it means that they're not barreling everything up with one particular pitch, and it's worth keeping in the repertoire. And then the sinker whiff rate is still 15.9%, which off the top of my head is pretty decent for a sinker. Sinkers oftentimes get hit pretty hard and often. So what's different about him this year, because he has been throwing these 5 pitches, the vertical movement on he's changed the vertical movement on most of those pitches, and they're all above average. So the vertical movement on the cutter is 18% above league average. On his curveball, it's 4% above league average. On his changeup, it's 9%, and on his sinker, it's 5%. He's also throwing his changeup harder, and it has more movement than it did last year. So with the change, batters are hitting 226 versus 257 last year. They're slugging 302 versus 367 last year. He's increased the spin rate on that pitch by over 200 RPMs. And so it's become, in a lot of ways, his best pitch. So the comp for his batted ball stats was Johnny Cueto. So what is Merrill Kelly? I think he's an underrated SP. I think currently he's a middle of the rotation starter that can give you a ton of innings. He really does limit hard contact, and then the changeup has just made him a much better pitcher. You can imagine trying to hit against a starter who's throwing 5 different pitches at you. You have especially if you can tunnel it, you have no idea where that pitch is going, right?
Right.
And we've seen Pitching Ninja put those things together where you have, a DeGrom fastball and a DeGrom slider, and they don't start moving until the very end. And they're moving in completely opposite directions. And so imagine there's 5 different directions that pitch can go. I think that's part of why he's been so effective. But looking at pitchers like Chris Bassett, like Merrill Kelly, and trying to understand how to compare or predict their success versus, say, a Spencer Strider who literally throws two elite pitches and that's it. How do we compare those when it comes down to choosing between one or the other during draft season? So that was fun for me to look at Merrill Kelly because that's a guy that I would pass on every time because he doesn't fit the typical characteristics that I look for to SP.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, outside of Mookie, I'm glad you highlighted the other three players we discussed. Were all picked up off waivers. I was just looking while you were going through Kelly's performance. He was picked up on April 4th off waivers. And we picked up Tyler Anderson in Fab TGFBI, and I picked him up as a waiver wire claim in our Dynasty League or a Keeper League as well. Yeah, so it goes a little bit into management as well. These guys who are basically free. And in the case of Anderson and Keller, both in the top 20 of earned value and 3.5 on players in real baseball this year. It's pretty incredible.
Just goes to show that if that it really is worth digging into that first, or having a list of players that you want to dig into on the free agent or on the waiver wire in that first month, but really pouncing on that and throwing some of those players at the wall and seeing who sticks, because you can find tremendous value in, think about it, like if Anderson was on the wire and Jimenez does get cut and Kelly is on the wire, like if you picked all three of those guys up, you had three of the top, I guess
60.
probably 60 players in the game
Yeah,
just for free. So
for
yeah,
free.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. All right. It's September call up. Who's the one player that intrigues you or that you're excited about? And I hope you don't have the same one.
Well, the guy who I will be really intrigued by because he's on a really exciting team and because he's a pitcher and that's my thing is DL Hall. He 6'2", 195 for the Orioles, left-handed pitcher. The things that are interesting to me, first of all, they moved into the bullpen. He was called up on the 1st of September. He's pitched twice. I'm interested to see what role they pitch him in, and obviously how he performs. From a Arsenal standpoint, he has a starter's arsenal, but they're using him in the bullpen to down the stretch here because they're in the playoff hunt. But he throws four seam, changeup, slider, and curveball. I like that his changeup as a left-handed pitcher, he uses it more than a slider. We've talked a lot about the importance of an effective changeup for left-handed starters. His stuff plus through his limited major league action is a 137.9, which is exceptional for a starting pitcher. In his command, he has run double-digit walk rates in the upper minors, anywhere from 12.5 to 14%, and most stops as he's made his way up to the big leagues. But despite that, his location plus is 98.9, so just a tick below average. So his pitching plus, which he takes into account locations and stuff, is 106.6, which again is really, really, really good. So he's had very limited opportunities, but that type of pitch quality, as well as my growing trust in the Orioles and the fact that we do have track records of guys coming in, breaking in the bullpen, and then transitioning back into the starting role. We've seen that path for very, very effective young pitchers in the last couple of years. So honestly, I'm more excited I'd prefer to have him over his Grayson Rodriguez at this point, not just because Grayson was hurt this year, but I think Hall is more intriguing and has, frankly, a higher ceiling. But yeah, I'm excited to watch him. I'm excited to see how they use him. I'm excited to see how his stuff and location numbers continue to take shape as he gets more reps, because he is very limited. But I'm excited about what he's done so far and what the future could hold for him.
Cool. Two questions off the bat. One
Sure.
is, would you feel differently about him if Baltimore hadn't moved their fence back in left field? If Baltimore is still kind of the long.
I did think about that, but honestly, I was thinking as a left-handed starter, I mean, it's really the right field that he's probably going to see more of an effect by. I think you've done a nice job of continuing to speak up about opposite field power. So for him, left field would be opposite field. Certainly with his velocity, I don't think a lot of guys are going to be able to turn on him, but I do think I don't think the ballpark would be a huge factor. I don't think it would affect the way I feel about him as a left-handed starter.
Right.
I did think about the division, I was thinking about how interested I would be in him as a keeper, in the longer term in the AL East. But ultimately, good pitchers are going to perform, and good pitching will beat good hitting.
Mhm.
So you can only limit the pool so much,
Sure. And so
especially with that kind of number, those kind of velocities and things.
do you think so you're expecting his command or at least his control to come around
Yeah,
both?
I mean, it's just encouraging to me that he's that close to league average, despite, his track record of high walk rates.
Sure.
That is concerning, and that does give me pause because that is something that I value is command. But I think certainly with pitchers, if you without the swing and miss, command's only going to get you so far.
Mhm.
So having a young guy who's there's still hope that maybe he can harness it,
Mhm.
at least maybe two of his four pitches, he has a really good command of that. That would be enough with him with the quality of his stuff at this point.
Would you think differently about him if not for the success of Spencer Strider this year? Because I think he fits some of that profile where the stuff was so totally incredible, but it's really kind of about two pitches. And in DL Hall's case, to be fair, it's more like 2.5 to 3 pitches. But I think that's how I see it in some ways. Is you're expecting for us looking at a pitcher um, with two really elite pitches and a lack of command or control coming into the season. I think it's a lot. Previously, it's a lottery ticket, right?
Yeah,
And I still see DL Hall that way. I like him. He's an exciting pitcher to watch. He's not one that I would count on being great because he does have to really change. In my opinion, he has to. It's not just a tweak; it's really learning to control. But if he does harness that at all, even as to your point, he could be a fastball changeup guy who throws the occasional slider, right? And can be at minimum a high strikeout mid rotation guy. But he does have number one starter stuff, and I think to see him healthy and pitching in Baltimore down the stretch, whereas Grayson Rodriguez is on the shelf, says quite a bit
yeah,
about him, especially him
yeah.
versus.
I mean, yeah. Again, he does have that intriguing ceiling, and
Mhm.
even with the walks, his K minus BB in AAA this year was 22%.
Right.
Which just speaks to the strikeout rates that he was getting in the upper minors, double A, triple A strikeout rates were 36 to 40%.
Right. I do think the left field will impacts my perspective on him quite a bit. Since he'll be facing right-handed batters mostly as a left-handed pitcher, especially left-handed pitcher with that kind of stuff. So if you got a right-handed hitter up who's pulling the ball to left field, take say he's facing a Ryan Mountcastle type or a Trey Mancini type, right?
Right.
A lot of those fly balls in 22 were home runs in 21. And so if
No,
that's
that's very important. Yeah, I was thinking about left-handed hitters. Yeah,
right, so
you're absolutely right.
if that's what he's facing in my mind, like I think that's a huge reason to bump him. And if I'm Baltimore, I'm trying to find left-handed starting pitching because
Yeah,
there's such an advantage now to having left I guess left center to be specific so far back.
yeah, that's
Um,
very astute on your point. Yeah,
but I appreciate that about Hall, and I think Hall is again he's one of those guys that I'll let someone else take the chance on, right? Because I don't think that the guarantee's not there, but the elite upside is. Um, but I do think he's one that I will enjoy watching for sure. But I also think there is reliever risk if he's not able to actually harness that command and control. Um, I also chose actually we should take a quick break and we'll come right back with my
okay.
September call up.
Save the files.
I will. Usually it does automatically. There's a story behind that. My September call up is Ken Waldachuk, left-handed starting pitcher for the Oakland A's. He was dealt to the A's from the Yankees this year in the Frankie Montas deal. He's 24 years old, left-handed starter. He'll be 25 in 2023. He's 6'4", listed 6'4", 220. He was a fifth round pick, 165th overall by the Yankees in the 19 draft out of St. Mary's College in California. He was unselected as a high schooler in 2016. Hey, we were able to upload that first portion of the podcast. That's great.
Yes.
Tools wise, Fangraphs graded him out as a 65 fastball, 50 slider, 45 curve, 70 change, 50 command, 50 future value. Pipeline had a 65 fastball, 50 curve, 55 slider, 55 change, 50 command, and a 55 overall. He's really, from the point that he was drafted to now, he's added some velocity and some movement to his fastball, and he's really changed his slider into much more of a sweeper. So he's 92 to 96 with tons of carry on his fastball. He's got a 1030 spin. So it kind of goes like, from a left-handed standpoint, right? It goes kind of almost like this. And then he sits 95 with that fastball, and he's coming from a 3/4 spot. So it's a really effective pitch when he elevates it against right-handed hitters. His slider has that back foot sweeping action, and it's a 4 o'clock movement on the slider. He only throws it currently in his first couple of starts. He's averaging 81.2 miles an hour on the slider, so it's not a very hard pitch at all. But it's got 44.1 inches of drop, which is 4.3 inches above league average and 11% above league average. And it's got 17.1 inches of horizontal movement, which is 6.2 inches above average, or 58% more than league average on the horizontal movement. So it's a really almost like a Frisbee slider, right? That he's throwing, that back foots that right-handed hitter. His change has 930 movement and is an 82.7 mile an hour average pitch. And that also has 4% above league average drop and is a league average horizontal movement. He throws his curve sometimes. It's 75 mile an hour pitch. It's got pretty much average drop, but horizontal is 21% above league average. So a big horizontal curve. But the other thing, so the change in the slider looked great. But the biggest thing that I found with him that I didn't know is his fastball averages 95, but he's got 7 feet of extension on his release. So very similar to, we talked a lot about Logan Gilbert's fastball and his reliance on it and the effectiveness of that fastball, in large part because of the extension. He sits 95, 96, but it looks like it's 99 to the hitter because he's releasing it so far out in front. Waldichuk has the same thing, right? So 7 feet of vertical extension makes a 95 mile an hour fastball look like, 98. So for me, when I look at him, I see an effective fastball down the road, right? He's effective now, but I see a really effective fastball down the road. I see a developing changeup with really good movement. And I see a slider that is a kind of a wipeout sweeper, Dodger sweeper type slider. I forgot what they call it. They call it the whirly in the Yankees organization. But he learned that slider in the Yankees organization. So this year in AA and AAA, he's 2-4 with a 3.53. He had 15 starts. He did have a 1.27 whip, but he struck out 91 hitters in 66 in the third innings. And then in 21 in high A and AA, 6-3 with a 3.03 ERA in 110 innings with 163 strikeouts. So big strikeout pitcher, was on everyone's radar as kind of a middle rotation starter, eventually with the Yankees. The other thing I love about Waldichuk now in his profile is he went from Yankee Stadium to Oakland. It's not going to help him with his wins, but I looked up the Savant 3-year rolling park factors for both parks. New York is an even 100 for overall hitting, and Oakland is a 94. So Oakland is 6% less, or 6% more difficult for hitters than league average, whereas New York grades out as a league average park. But Overall, for home runs in New York over the last 3 years, it's 16% above average, 116 park factor, and Oakland is a 77 park factor. So 23% more difficult than league average. Furthermore, for right-handed hitters, which is what Waldichuk will face the most as a left-handed hitter, the home run park factor for New York, 3-year running rolling average is 113. In Oakland, it's 70. So it's 30% more difficult in Oakland over the last 3 years to hit a home run than league average. So here's a pitcher who was already supposed to be a high strikeout, middle of the rotation starter for the Yankees, who's now going to what is the most difficult park for a right-handed hitter to hit a home run. He's also playing in a division, although divisions matter less. He's playing in a division with Seattle, which is also difficult. So what do I see in Waldichuk? His fastball slider combo are already nasty. I think what will make him an elite starter and maybe a sneaky ace will be the development of the changeup. Kind of, I'm singing the same tune as I always do. Fastball and slider will induce a ton of whiffs. I like any pitcher who can change that, who can tunnel the two pitches, but really change the eye level. So fastball up, slider down. I love that. Hit a really high swinging strike rate in the minors. It was never below 14%. It was as high as 17.6% in rookie ball. He's 6'4", 220, so he's sturdy. He's got a repeatable delivery. I think it's like I said earlier, I think his ceiling is much higher in Oakland than it would have ever been in New York outside of wins. So for me, he's a starter that I would already be buying heading into 23, especially in dynasty leagues. Worth trading for, in my opinion. And I'll be watching the development of his changeup really, really closely, because if he can develop that changeup to go with the fastball and the slider, I think he's sneakily maybe an ace. Which is not what I expected when I decided to research Ken Waldichuk. So that one was fun for me. Someone that I'm really excited about. All right. Any comments on Waldichuk? Any thoughts?
The Logan Gilbert extension comp is interesting. All I can think about now when I hear Logan Gilbert is his alter ego's name, which is Walter. So
Do you have any thought? Did you watch his last start?
I watched the condensed game. I made a point to watch it. Yes.
Man, I haven't looked at his pitch mix now versus, the beginning of the year. He looks like a really different pitcher, though. I've really quite enjoyed watching him most recently. He's looked like he was a pitcher that I was on the fence about really prioritizing to keep heading into next season, because I didn't know if his ceiling was quite as high as Kirby and some of the others. I think he's made some changes, and I have to trust his intellect and work ethic to really make changes that he needs to make. I'm quite pleasantly surprised with his last couple of starts. Cool. All right, breakout star for 2023. You texted me and asked me how I defined star, and I purposely did not answer your text because
nice to know you purposely ignored me.
I did. I think it makes for better content to not really put parameters around it. So just for real quickly, Gilbert's extension is on his fastball 7.4 feet, I believe, which makes him puts him in the 99th percentile. So I assume Waldichuk is in the 90th, but not quite, obviously not quite as high as Gilbert's is. Sorry, that was just I needed to do that.
Yeah. So my star for next year is Dustin May. Mm-hmm. It's encouraging that he's back on the mound, looking healthy. I think anything that the Dodgers get out of him, then they definitely need him as a bonus this year. But I really think going into next year with this year's workload under his belt and fully healthy offseason, I fully expect this time next year that he'll be looked at as the ace of that staff, and the ace of one of the best teams in baseball. I know that's heresy with as long as Kershaw's on the team. You look at what Julio Urias is doing this year after a slow start, but I really look at what he did last year in 21 before he got hurt. Came on a CB of 33%, running a 55% ground ball rate. Was really starting to command his arsenal to the point where he wasn't just minimizing hard contact and getting outs, but getting swing and miss. which is huge for fantasy. I just think he was ascending when he got hurt, and it's going to be delayed. But again, I think this time next year, we'll be looking at him as the ace of the Dodgers. I really would believe that.
You think is there such a thing as getting hurt because you were throwing too hard?
Probably.
That's my one worry with him. I agree. I think his numbers are, you dig into his numbers, they're off the charts, obviously. Stuff, ground ball rate, coupling the ground ball rate with the K rate, all the things that we look for. But I did wonder if that kind of uptick in performance was him giving an extra 2%, and giving that extra 2% is what injured him. Just a thought in the back of my mind. I don't know. I don't want that to happen. I don't think that's what's going on, but I think it's worth putting out there.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's blasphemous to think of him as the ace next year, because Kershaw, to me at this point, if you can only count on 120 innings, he's a kind of just a wild card where you don't even really slot him in. And if he pitched 200 innings, sure, he's like your ace or your number two. And Urias is, I think, at best is a number two, and maybe even he'll settle in the rest of his career as maybe a number three with tons of wins, right? But yeah, Dustin May is incredibly exciting. I think that's a great call. My breakout star, so you'll see how I define star when I tell you who the player is. Sorry, is Isaac Paredes. And I do actually see him as a potential star, believe it or not. So Isaac Paredes, Tampa Bay Rays. I have his position as utility because he could play almost passable anywhere in the infield, outside of catcher, and in the both corner outfield spots. I think catcher and center field are the only two positions, and maybe shortstop that he can't play. 5'11", 213. He's only 23 years old. He was traded from Detroit with a competitive balance round B pick to Tampa Bay for Austin Meadows on April 5th. I think Tampa Bay ripped off Detroit because Meadows has always been a paper tiger. I don't like players with an above 20-degree launch angle. Sorry, Byron Buxton, I love you, but I don't. Paredes was signed by the Cubs in 2015. He was traded in 17 with Heimer Candelario for Alex Avila and Justin Wilson. All right, enough of that. Fangraphs Tools has Paredes as a 60 hit, 45 game, 50 raw, 20 speed, which I found interesting. 40 field and a future value of 45. He must have concrete blocks in his feet for the 20 speed. This year, 307 plate appearances, 18 home runs, 43 runs, 40 RBIs, 10.1% walk rate, 17.9% K rate. But the stat that I sorted for first when looking for my breakout star was BABIP. So I did the reverse sort with BABIP, and I wanted to start with the lowest BABIP possible, with 200 200 at our plate appearances or more. And when I hit Paredes at a 199 BABIP, I said, okay, what is he doing with the 199 BABIP currently, right? So he's hitting 213 with the 296 on base and a 460 slug. So he still has a 120 WRC plus, even though he has a 199 BABIP. 87.3 miles per hour average exit velocity, but he has a 110 plus with his max, 15.8 degree launch angle. So another thing I would look for with a really low BABIP is he just hitting the ball straight up in the air, right? Because ground balls tend to drive your BABIP up, fly balls tend to drive your BABIP down. And so when I saw that his launch angle was pretty much optimal, then the BABIP starts to become luck in a lot of ways, unless he's not hitting the ball hard at all. But 6.8% barrel rate, and a 37.4% hard hit. Ground ball to fly ball is optimal. They're very equal. He's a dead pull hitter, so 54.8% pull. But if they're going to outlaw the shift, or if they're going to really greatly reduce the shift, which they're voting on pretty soon for 2023, all of a sudden the 55% pull rate is not necessarily a bad thing anymore, right? His swinging strike rate is only 6.1%, which is super low. We're talking about like Mookie Betts territory. And his zone contact is 91.2%. So he's got the hand-eye coordination that we're looking for. He's gotten super unlucky with batting average of balls in play. He hits the ball at exactly the launch angle that we're looking for on average. And he's not hitting the ball in the air or on the ground any more or less than we would really want. So you got a player with great hand-eye coordination. He obviously has power. He's 20% better than league average from a WRC plus standpoint, even though his BABIP is so low. So to me, when I look at a player like that, if he has 18 home runs in 300 plate appearances and a double-digit walk rate, right? Let's think about, say he has a positive BABIP year, and his BABIP is reflective of his average essentially. You're talking about like a 290 hitter, 280, 290 hitter with tons and tons and tons of power. So for me, he's a player that I will probably target in the late rounds if I can, especially if he has multi-position eligibility. And I think he could be a really great power source for next year. I would bet he has a OBP above 8, so let's say 830 next year. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him as a 900, or excuse me, a OPS, a 900 OPS guy by the end of next year. I just found, go ahead.
He certainly has an eye at the plate to support that kind of on base to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll have
got
first, second.
Power too.
Yeah, he'll have first, second, and third next year. He's has enough appearances at all three of those spots. He'll have triple eligibility.
Man, he sounds like a Hoyt Naturals type of player there, or smoke on smoke type of player there. What do you think? Multi-position eligibility, big OPS. But yeah, I think he is. If he hit 25 to 30 home runs next year with a 280 average, would not surprise me one bit. Not at all. Wouldn't surprise me to see him start hitting in the middle of that Tampa Bay order for 500 plate appearances next year.
It's interesting his pull rate that you highlighted because that's been a shift for him. He was more neutral in 2020, and then he started to go more pull in 21, and then this year he's really leaned into it, where he's at that 51% that you highlighted. But as little 2 years ago, he was 30% opposite field. So he was really an off-field approach. But I mean, you look at his spray chart now, as you said, like all his power is to left field.
Well, I wonder too if he did the Justin Turner thing a little bit, where you're trying to get out in front of the ball, right? They're talking about getting out in front of the ball and then lifting it to left field, as opposed to maybe that inside out type of opposite field swing. It would not surprise me if he really did make that kind of adjustment to try to yank the ball out to left field. But no, I don't know. He's a player that I like, Waldachuk, that I will certainly target, and I think has big potential for next year. All right. Games you're looking forward to next couple of days?
Yeah, so number one for me is Ohtani pitching tomorrow. Number two, the Seattle-Atlanta series, not only because you'll be there Sunday, but I think both of these teams are really hot. And I love the pitching matchups on Friday and Saturday. Sunday is a bit of a clunker in terms of the pitching, but tonight is Ray and Morton. And then tomorrow, I'm really excited to watch Kirby and Fried. So that series is the most exciting series of the weekend. And then also backed up by Minnesota Cleveland. Two very different types of teams, but both those teams are really tight, and both of them have great bullpens, and they really rely on timely hitting, situational hitting, to kind of squeak out close games. So it'll be interesting to see them go ahead. And I personally have a lot of pieces of both of those bullpens, so that'll be a little bit stressful, I'm sure. And then last for me is just I'll be in Pittsburgh on Sunday, watching Jose Quintana and Mitch Keller, and hovering over third base and watching Ke'Bryan Hayes.
Awesome. So, did the Braves name their starter on Sunday?
I thought in the RotoWire grid it was not. It's like Odorizzi, but not. Odorizzi's. I get Odorizzi and the guy from the Phillies mixed up. But I'll pull it up. I
I'm
know
kind
it's like their
of
sixth starter.
bleh. I got to be determined on ESPN and MLB. Um, but yeah, I and Marco would be my last, I guess, for action in the field. He's a great starter to watch. But of the Mariners starters, besides Flexen, who's not starting anymore, he's my least favorite to watch. So, but
Yeah.
I'm still incredibly excited to be there. It's
Oh,
gonna be
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. So RotoWire has this Odorizzi and Marco.
Oof. Maybe it's an offensive explosion. That might be fun.
Yeah, it might be.
Um, so I also have Freed and Kirby, obviously, but Otani, I think the Otani start is also interesting for me because he's going against the Astros. And I just think the Astros are kind of the AL litmus test for any elite starter. Not that Otani needs one, but I just think it's such a huge challenge to face that
Oh,
line.
absolutely it is.
Every Mariner starter that I love and roster, right? It's the Houston games are the ones where I'm like, all right, if they're for real, this is where they're gonna really perform, and it's scary to face the Astros, in my opinion. The other games I have highlighted are I do roster Edward Cabrera, and he pitches against the Mets, another guy who I think is potentially an ace in the making. And then Frankie Montas in a clutch game against the Tampa Bay Rays on Friday, and against I almost said Dennis Rasmussen, Drew Rasmussen. Um, Montas, I think it's interesting to see how he's performed or not performed thus far in New York. Um, and if they're going to be able to get out of him what they thought they were getting when they traded for him. But it's a big series against the Rays this weekend, and I'll be interested to see that game as well.
Yeah, like the all 2020 prospect matchup on Sunday with Patino and Clark Schmidt.
Patino, man. The only cool thing about Patino now is, well, besides the fact that he's throwing a two-seamer, is he switched to number one. I don't know if you saw that.
I did not.
It's still off-putting for me to see a single-digit pitcher. But it was kind of cool to see him wear number one since he's so small. And I think of that number as a small player. Um, you got time for open forum or cards?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Want to go ahead and why don't you start with the open forum question?
Yeah, so my open forum a little bit broader. People around me have been doing their football drafts, and it's
Yeah.
kind of put me on memory lane of when I used to play fantasy football and some of the drafts that I was a part of for those leagues. And I was just curious for you, funnest draft experience that you've ever had, any sport or anything. I assume it would be baseball, but maybe not. But I was just, again, I've just been thinking about it this week, and I thought it'd be a fun question. Because
Most
especially with football, I think the draft is really it. Like
sure.
it's the best part of the whole season. Baseball, that's not true, but from my experience with football, like it was like start off on that high and then nothing really compared to it.
Sure. Uh Same league, two different drafts. So my buddies, I had opened Empire Espresso in Columbia City, South Seattle. And a couple years in, I had a buddy, Jason Hoft, who's an attorney, who randomly he calls me while I'm working, but it's towards the end of my shift in the afternoon. He's like, "Hey man, I got a 12-team league. It's mostly attorneys. We had a guy drop last minute, and I wasn't really following. I was following football, but I wasn't really invested in fantasy football as much as I just pure baseball, right?" He's like, "We had somebody drop. Is there any way you can get to, this address in Ravenna, which is North Seattle, in an hour?" And I said, "I think so. I'd love to play. Hold on." I left the shop, because I had people working and I owned it. So I'm like, all right, I got to go. But the kicker is that I rode my bike exclusively for like 10 years, right? So I've got to go from South Seattle to North Seattle in an hour on a fixed gear bike, having very little experience. Not, I had a lot of experience, but very little up to date knowledge with football. I bought a magazine on my way, right? And I rode up to the house in Ravenna, who was another one of his buddies. And I literally drafted looking at the magazine. And I never draft like, I never, I'm not a chalk drafter, right? I like to be all over the place. And I love Brady because I'm a Michigan grad. And so I think in that league, I took Brady and built didn't build the team around him because you don't pick quarterbacks that high, but he was the only player that I remember having. But I won. And they were so pissed because here you got like 11 veterans, guys who work together. This one attorney has a buddy that owns a coffee shop who's into sports who rode his bike up there to draft last minute with the magazine and killed it. So that's one memory of last minute. Just maybe it's also a comment that we shouldn't put quite as much as invest quite as much time into researching as we do. Although football's a lot of luck and injuries. The other one is same league. Well, I've got two more. Sorry, and I won't go for too long. One is same league, had everyone over to my place. I made ribs, like smoked ribs, and hosted for everyone. And this is a big drinking group too. So it basically just became completely debaucherous and full of food and rib bones all over the place and lasted for 4 hours. But that one was super fun. The other one was we rented a portion of a bar in Belltown out. I forgot what it was called. It was by the Bells Brewery or Tavern. Um, but that too was like we had, you have a server waiting on you the whole time, and everyone is just blitzed. And we had one of those huge. This was back in the day. We had one of those huge boards where you put the player's name on there. Um, and that draft was really fun. But that was a fun group of guys. I'm sad that I'm not in that league anymore, having moved out of Seattle, because one of the requirements was that you were present for the draft. But those drafts were always just a huge party.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
do you have a draft that you love or an idea for a draft that you would like to see?
No, I think your experience is very much mirror like what I've been reminiscing about. I was in the league with, I had a coworker I went to college with, and we worked together, and he had a group of friends that played uh, in fantasy football, and
Mm-hmm.
I got kind of grandfathered in through this friend, so kind of like was the new guy, and yeah, we had one year where we went up to Chicago and saw a Cubs game, and then we did the draft the next night. So kind of like a whole weekend thing. And the
Mm-hmm.
commission always did like the big board printed up,
Mm-hmm.
and um yeah, just did a great job. He just always did a great job. And then um I remember then I had won it one year, and then um I won it. We used to play individual defensive players, and
Mm-hmm.
I won the championship game because Jonathan Vilma, a linebacker for the Jets, had an interception return for a touchdown in week 17.
University
And
of Miami. Mm-hmm.
I won the league on that. And then I was defending. And that was, I also had Brady when I was defending that year. Um, and I had like three or four running backs that were really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
I had a great draft that night. That time we were at his house, and he had a friend who was a chef, and he made like jambalaya
Oh, that's
from
awesome.
like scratch. And the same kind of thing. Some of the guys drink and they get rowdy, and other guys are like studious, and
Right.
you get all different personalities. Yeah,
Right.
with the big board there, and it is the event of the season.
Yep.
So very, very similar type memories and experiences.
So piggybacking on your question, if we as our 16 team league could do anything possible for our draft next year, what would it be?
Well, I think realistically, given that we're all so far apart, I would like to just have more face-to-face interaction, and um yeah, so like maybe, you know, one night a week for 5 weeks, we get online for 2 hours, and you know what I mean, and hammer out 3 or 4 rounds or something like that. Um, yeah, just more interaction, whatever it looks like, whether it's technology or travel or whatever.
So how feasible is it for you to take a couple days off in March and fly to Arizona?
For me, it's feasible, but I mean, there's 15 other people.
Get right. Um, we're gonna at the end of in January at work, we're gonna choose vacation for starting in March. And I'm already eyeballing which week in March I want to take off because I would love to go down there, but I think it would be so much fun to be down there together, even if it's for like 2 days and we'd only draft 3 rounds in those 2 days and go to a bunch of ball games. So I know I tried to put that in motion in the last couple of years, but I think it's more, at least for me personally, it's even more feasible now. It's more feasible now than ever. That's my absolute dream is to be at spring training with everyone and be able to do that. So I'm planting the bug right now. Um, my other question was going to be, would you ever trade Shohei Ohtani?
No,
Under no circumstances.
no.
All right. I just thought I'd ask.
It's all good. Good question.
Do you want to open cards? You want me to grab some?
I can do it. You
Sweet.
did it last time, so we can work through some more of these 2022 Donruss here. Trying to grab like half of what's left. All right, so the first one is Brian De La Cruz. Let me turn off my blur here. The answer to your last question was just off the cuff. I don't think I ever would. So, um, anyway, don't hold me to that, but feel free to. Either way, I don't really care.
Still your player, right? Doesn't
Yes,
matter.
yeah. So this is one of the ones like we had with Bryce Hopper. So it's Fernando Tatis, but it says Nando.
Oh,
So
nice.
I'm assuming that's his nickname on Players Day.
Are there no logos?
No, there's not.
You know why? I think I remember why there are no logos now.
Yeah.
I think
So you
Top wasn't Topps commissioned to be like the only card brand that could use major league logos.
certainly seems that way. They have a MLB Players Association logo, but no MLB logo.
Hmm.
Andre Jackson,
Nice.
organizational depth piece for the Dodgers.
I like
Diamond Kings. These I like these illustrations. We had a couple of these. Rafael Devers, who's had
Devers. Man, talk about a free fall.
crazy second half for him.
Yeah.
Injured Shane Baz, everyone's flavor of the year
Not
in the spring.
mine. Not mine.
Another cool illustration of our guy Ketel Marte.
Hmm. I think
So
Bob
this is
was my number 4 or number 5 right-handed prospect.
AJ Alexi,
He's actually a rated rookie.
Bernie Rosarina, not a
That's
player.
the old style. That was from like 88, maybe. That border.
Colton Welker,
Hmm. I've come to like a Rosarena
really?
a little bit. Like he's so all over the board and he hits the ball into the ground 30 straight at bats, but he still puts up numbers, you know?
You do kind of wonder how he produces when you watch him play.
Hmm.
Corbin Burns,
Nice.
14
He had
strikeouts
a
last
hell of
night.
a hell of a start yesterday, huh?
Yeah, 14 strikeouts. Best start of the year, I think, probably for him. Kyle Mueller,
I picked him up for a start. He doesn't seem like I don't know if there's anything elite about him, but he seems like a serviceable dude.
I have to show you this. This was on top. I wasn't planning to show it, but this is really awesome. So we were talking about the Orioles, Brooks Robinson,
Oh,
and
cool.
it's got like a foil stamp in it.
Huh.
It's really beautiful.
It's probably,
That's awesome.
let me look something up here. Rosarena is a 55 across the board, other than a 45 field in Fangraphs, but he's a 60 future value.
All right,
Terrific.
last one. I promise. I said that was it, but I have to show you your guy pitching this weekend. It's
Robbie
a really cool
Ray.
card.
I don't know if I love him. What color is the foil, or what number is it red foil?
Brooks Robinson,
Yeah,
number 5.
the card number is number 5.
No, number 136. Card number 136. He's wearing number 5. My bad.
And is it out of a certain number of cards? Is it like out of 500 or something like that?
Forgive me, it doesn't say.
Okay.
It's 2022 Panini Donruss Baseball.
Hmm. They're selling for like $5 on eBay. I just wanted to see if it was like a super limited card or something.
It's really pretty though.
Get your money back on it. Cool.
All right, friend.
All right, man. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the Pirates game.
Yeah, enjoy your girls and
I,
the Mariners. I'm
I
excited for
am,
you.
man. I'm. It's gonna be a good time. I miss Malia. It's going into her junior year. See if she can be an All American this year.
Junior college or junior high school?
Junior college. I think I told you last season she was all conference, all region.
You did tell me, yes.
So we'll see if she can be an all 5'2" All American for left fielder. We'll see what happens. Anyways, brother. Yep. Enjoy the
Bye.
weekend. Have a great time. It's good to see you.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you.